You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Boxx. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Boxx.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. I'm Sarah Boxx, your host, and we are on a mission to help others challenge their limiting labels and beliefs and live fully without limitations. And today I am joined by my colleague who most of you, or many of you, if not most, already know, Ken Fay, who is our Sandbox team lead creative video maker, and honestly kind of fun guy. And we're going to talk about teppanyaki. How's that sound? Does that fill right into the purpose of the No Labels, No Limits? We're using it as a metaphor, so hang in there. It'll make sense to you. But, you know, we want to talk today about how you can think differently about getting your stories out into the world through video, sometimes other ways, but we're going to specifically stay on the topic of video because why not when you have an Emmy award-winning filmmaker and storyteller on the team? So with that, though, Ken, say hello, and then we'll dive right in. And why are we talking about teppanyaki? Let's get it that frame so people aren't going, I am out of here.
Oh my goodness, konnichiwa. I'm sure my Japanese is terrible, but food brings everyone together, doesn't it, Sarah? I mean, that is the thing. Listen, if I could have everyone listening and watching gathered around a nice big table of a meal, just shared, wouldn't that be fun? Just to share stories, to share life together. I mean, that's the community we're talking about here.
Yep, it is. And, you know, I found when I've worked with different folks, like different cultural groups, one of the first things, because I'm such a type A, let's get in there, get the work done. And one of the best things that happened, this gal looked at me, is like, I was crazy. She goes, no, that's not how it's going to work. I said, well, here's our agenda. And man, I had it crammed from like 8:30 a.m. till we were going to leave at 4:30, lunch break and a break. And she goes, well, where are we going to eat? I'm going, what do you mean, where are we going to eat? I said, can people, she goes, no, our group, we potluck. That's that's how we bond, kind of like you're talking about it. She goes, we need at least an hour, possibly an hour and a half for meal and hanging out with each other. And in my head, I'm going, you got to be kidding me. But it was the best thing ever because they're talking about our work while they're eating and having fun. And I got to meet people. So around the table is always great. And I just learned to slow my horses down. And now one of the first things I think about when people say, hey, will you facilitate an all-day retreat is, hey, let's talk about food first. What are your folks like? Are you bringing it in? Do I need to figure out to cater it? What's that? Because we want people's hearts and minds into the day and each other, not going, I need to eat. So.
Yeah. And, you know, the hearth in the home is a big deal. I mean, you know, gathering around the kitchen, where are most stories told, but in the kitchen, right? Like you're making a meal, you're working a meal, you're together at holidays or what have you. And it's all wrapped around food. And food is a part of that brings it out. And, you know, that had me thinking about the chefs that I've worked with in my career to show what they do in creating these amazing masterpiece dishes. And to show the ingredients that they work with and how they put it all together and everything that happens behind the scenes in the kitchen so that you're out there in the dining room and there's a nice plate of food just set in front of you. You had no idea. But that's where the teppanyaki comes in because you have someone standing in front of you who's really just working the table and they have the spatulas, right? And they flip the egg in the air and they have all these things happening and you're watching it come to life in front of you right on this grill. And that's fun too, right? To see the behind the scenes of how it happens. And so that just had you and I talking just before this podcast about, that's kind of what you do with storytelling. That's what we do with the Sandbox is that we are more like a teppanyaki where we have the behind the scenes. We have that very, very expert chef at play with it, but we're having fun with it. And you are too.
Absolutely. And, you know, we'll leave the teppanyaki here in a minute, but the one thing I've always enjoyed when I've gone to a restaurant that does that is, you know, if you're not a big group, then you're sharing that space with other people who you likely don't know. But this funny thing is once something happens, someone says something, you start conversing and learning about other people and what they do, where they're from. Was this the first time they've done this? Have they had this type of food? So, I mean, you start getting this connection that if you were just meeting at a restaurant, you wouldn't be having in the same way, because it's just more action oriented and fun. So with that, the reason we're starting that is because we're taking our conversation today around storytelling, because this particular project that we are dissecting, if you will, or demystifying for you, was based on an activity, if you will. So it wasn't like, hey, we need an origin story or we need that. It's like, there's an activity. We know there are stories there, and we need to capture it, because for this organization, that is their biggest fundraiser of the year. And anybody who's done fundraisers know that you want to make sure you're not missing an opportunity. So Ken, let's come into this from that point where we were asked to do this for their walk, and take it away. Like, where did we start? Where was the center of that activity? And how did we end up with all these videos and different points of view?
Well, that all starts with that creative conversation in the start of it all. We listen and we hear what they have to say, what their drive is. And in this case, it was an event. It was a walking event, an awareness walk, and for autism. And it was quite the event. They've had it many, many years in a row. And they were having it at a very cool venue in Southern California, at an air museum right next to an Air Force Base. So immediately I'm thinking, oh, you have this giant walk that goes on for acres and acres and acres and acres and acres. It's an airfield. And you have this amazing historical aircraft all gathered around. You have this perfect space to bring people in, and be an awareness for autism, to celebrate the teams, to celebrate the folks in the community, to teach, educate. I mean, there were tents set up to register people in and make it fun. They had entertainment, they had music, they had food. Oh my goodness, speaking of food, they had food. And then they had the whole area where they were educating folks. And all the community partners that were in the area to say, this is where you can get help for medical care. This is where you can get help for counseling. This is where you can get help for whatever it is. They were all there. And so they had to create this space that was accessible, safe, fun, and celebrated this just soaring to new heights was their theme. Great at an air base, right as an air museum. But the whole idea was just to let people just soar. And it was so welcoming with all these folks. It was still yet so welcoming and so well organized that it just flowed through the day. So here I am thinking, oh my goodness, there's a lot to cover here. So do I need multiple? So right away, I'm like, do I need multiple cameras? Can I get a drone to fly that close to an air base? Probably not, but I can certainly try. How do I cover this? How do I tell this kind of a story? Well, going through all the machinations of what we do behind the scenes, it came down to, we were just going to cover the story for what it was, i.e. we were going to walk the camera through as if you were attending, and that camera was you, right? So we see the registration tables, we see the different partners gathered around, we see people's faces and conversations, but we interject into that the walk itself, the start, especially, right? The balloon arch and the start of the walk and the finish and all that excitement. But we also interject real interviews with folks. Why are you coming back this year? What do you get out of this walk? Who are you supporting this year? Because every team had shirts and t-shirts made up celebrating someone, celebrating life. And the folks there, the volunteers, had signs saying, you got this, you can do it. It was so fun and festive. And we wanted to make sure we covered all those nuances, because that's what this event was about. So we talk about the event, we talk about why it was important, what it means, why people should come, and why they should come next year. And at the same time, we wanted to show the fun festivities of it all, and actually have that serious message in the interviews of why it matters. You know, we talked to a mom who was struggling with this, and you know, how she overcame it because of this amazing organization, and why you should feel comfortable. Just come and get help. Just give us a call. Come on over, go for the walk, come next year, whatever it is, but you're not alone. It was all about not being alone. And that was a core message that we centered on.
So Ken, you know, you talk about folks not wanting to be alone. I am drawn to the fact that when we started, it was very much focused on the event itself and trying to get people to come out. But we knew from the beginning that it could be much more than that. And so we started talking about, very simple. They wanted to speak to 2 or 3 people, right? And really highlight them at the event. But then it was like, oh, but you know who else we need to talk to? Oh, and then you know who else we need to talk to. So we added on folks, but not just because it was like, who do you want to talk to? It's like, what do they represent? And then think of the best folks who can share their story with that. And they need to be at the event, if at all possible, because we're only there for 2 days and the event's the big part of it. But out of that, you talked to first responders and you talked to the national guy who talked about how special this group was here in the Southern California area. And I think one of the folks I was very touched by was a grandma, who was caring. So talk about how when you get barraged with all of these ideas, like we should talk to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, we quit the overwhelm and bring it into like, okay, how do we focus this? Take that away. How do you do that?
So maybe to help with that, as I love making puzzles, right? Like the old fashioned sit at a table, have a puzzle, you put all the pieces out, do the corners first or whatever it is. So storytelling to me is like that in this case. There's so many parts and pieces we could put together into this magnificent tapestry of a puzzle. But some of those puzzle pieces are the same. They're cut the same. They have the same edge to them. They have the same kind of, in this case, message to them. So it was more of, that's great. We have all of this. That's great. Let's find the ones that just really encapsulate what we're trying to say. So is it that grandmother about being a caretaker? Is that the story? Or is it someone else that should talk besides her that would have more of an impact story? But where are we in this? Do I have to talk to all the board of director folks, or just that one that has that really interesting, unique piece to it? So you try to find the unique pieces of the story. That's how you can start to take it from, oh my goodness, it's all of it, to like, oh, okay, it's a handful. Okay, now from that handful, we go a little bit deeper. I don't want to ask them all the same question, although I will do that occasionally because everyone will answer it differently, but that weaves a nice tapestry of a story too. But it's kind of like, we're going to focus on the board of director. We're going to focus on the organizational part of this. Or we're going to focus with the grandmother. We're going to focus on the caretaking part of this. The law enforcement, we're going to focus on how does this program integrate with your efforts in the community. So it kind of weaves itself through there. And they all have their own story to tell. I didn't pre-interview any of them. I met them that day. I went over a little bit of what we were going to talk about, and I listened as important to their story before we started rolling the camera. And then I was able to integrate those thoughts into this, and it just co-creating with them and enhancing what they were saying. And that's really how you take all of that and you kind of focus it into something that's going to mean something. And I'm always listening for sound bites, and I'm listening for ways to integrate, like what he said goes wonderfully with what she said, but I talked to her an hour later, but in my mind, those go right together. And it just continually tells that story, because it's like an orchestra to me. All these are parts and pieces of an orchestra, or they're ingredients in a great meal. And I want there to be this crescendo of sound, this crescendo of a moment of story, just so that it just kind of flows out there. And then people can relate to it, and they come away with it feeling, different, empowered, moved, ready to take action, ready to know more. And that's part of that journey.
So you had a unique situation in this because it was outdoors. We were trying to get a handle on, before you actually landed with boots on the ground, so to speak, to figure out where were you going to stage things. You didn't know. You'd never been to that site before. We had no idea what the outdoor weather would be like. There was some indoor space. So here you are, you're landing the night before, but then you guys go in there. You've got to set up your quote unquote green room, ready room for folks to meet and greet them. How'd you work with the team on that so that the team was involved, their team was involved, that people felt comfortable, and that when there was that warm handoff to you, they were already kind of ready to go?
Well, that's all the art of what we do, bringing people to this point of production. So that's all what we call pre-production. And that's, we do pre-production, then production, and then post-production, right? And we could talk about that deeper another time. But we walk through the story with that in mind. So pre-production allowed me to work with their team on who was the point of contact, dates, times, names, contact information. And then I reached out as well, in this case, to those actual interviewees to say, hey, my name is Ken. I'm with Sandbox. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Sunday. And these are a few quick things we're going to talk about. And so I was able to pre-engage them just a little bit so that they didn't come in totally like, what's going on? So it was all about strategy and coordination, which is just as important as strategy and storytell, because there's a production logistics that Sarah, you're amazing at, that makes this machine run smoothly in the background. And that's working with our client partners and teaching their team along the way how that works. Right? We're not just a one and done and we leave. We show you the ingredients like a tapenaki, right? We show you what's happening. And so that they were able to then do that. And then empowering that marketing team, whatever they designate as their people to connect with, that I shoulder up next to them. I don't tell them what to do. I work with them where they're at and what they can offer. And we coordinated these set times and places. So yeah, I arrived on scene. We had a room in the museum that we could coordinate and make our own set. So we did that. We had a wonderful partner that they were associated with called Options for All. That is a school that teaches folks with autism how to do video production. So they had a little studio, and that was off-site, but not too far away. So I suggested we use that as a place to interview folks and be a teaching moment. And so that coordinated another level of coordination with another partner, because the more people you involve in this and bring into this, the more people can be excited about it and celebrate it. And then they celebrate it, they share it, they talk about it, and it just creates a deeper sense of community, which is really what the whole video was about.
It really was. It had really great energy. I wanted to tell you and listeners, so we're talking about the Autism Society of the Autism Society Inland Empire, which is based in Southern California. But I just went back to check out their website. So they've got the videos up there, but they just finished this year's walk and they had a goal of $130,000 and they came so close. And for all I know, they may have had a last minute donor that put them over the top, but it was so close and it was so great. I mean, that was an ambitious goal for them. And to see how close they got to it, it just made me feel great. So on behalf of us, I just sent hey, this is pretty cool, you guys. But it was great to see they had the video from last year playing, like, here's the vibe of the walk. And so these things really aren't one and done. When they're done, you can use them so many different ways. So pretending we didn't know how they wanted to use them, if you just saw this or you know what we've got on there in terms of their assets library, if you will, what are other ways when people think we have this event, how you could use that? So it's not like, oh, we have an event. How else could you use it? And in what places? Not just like to tell that story, but what other stories could you tell from that, Ken?
You know, I've had this question quite a bit, and I've been able to be in situations where that's come up. And I find that there's so much excitement generated about the event that folks forget that the event is a story. So I've suggested to many folks to make that event, say it's an event night, it's a dinner and presentations, all right? Well, that's wonderful, and you're bringing the community together, but are you recording any of it? Are you showing anything at it? Because I have recorded video prior to the event about the organization or what have you, and roll them in as people are sitting there having their dinner, so they get a video presentation. It's more of a multimedia experience. Are they thinking that way? And then on the night of the event, do they have a camera rolling around? Are they capturing people gathering and meeting and talking and eating and having a great time? Do they have someone doing a quick interview on a red carpet? Which I set up red carpets for folks to make it exciting for those coming. So they're like, oh my goodness, this is special, you know? And they come in and they get recorded, and why are you here? What do you think? And then of course the keynote speakers, people spend a lot of time and energy and effort on presenting. Well, how about interviewing that keynote speaker? What are the takeaways here? What's important here? All those parts and pieces to an event create a larger way of telling your story for a much longer time than just one night to a community that just grows and grows and grows. And so you can always point back to, you know, in the year 2020, we had this. Now in 2024, oh my goodness, look at where we are now. And then they have the archive footage that they can then be put together to kind of like a sizzle reel of excitement, showing the changes in their organization and how it got bigger and bigger and grander, and folks coming in, and it's just makes it more fun. So thinking about an event not just as a one and done day, and I'm glad that's done. It's more like, no, there's more to it than that. What do we do with this event? How do we show it? How do we engage our community the night of, and then the next day, and then the next month, and how about the next year? So it's keeping that in mind.
Well, and even if it's not a quote unquote fundraising event, perhaps it's an educational event, right?
Yeah.
There are sound bites from that you can take and say, this is what we do and why we do it, right? Doesn't have to be long. But I think to your point is to have the footage, the raw footage, whether it's video or photo. If you don't capture it, you can't use it.
Right. That's right. If you don't capture it, you can't use it. There's, I've heard someone say, well, if you didn't record it, it never happened. And it's like, I guess there's some, of course it happened, but no one else will have experienced it.
Right.
And so there are many folks that want to give, donate, help, support, volunteer, but they couldn't make it there for that event. Well, this is as a gift you can give them to say this, and they can still support you. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. And there's a lot of things that wrap around it. And there's a lot of ways to make it fun. And that's what we're talking about here. Like I strive that when someone's in front of the camera and I happen to be the interviewer, or I am the camera, I strive for those folks to be natural, to be fun, to relax, to have a good time. I never, they talk about the deer in the headlights, like, I don't know what to say. We talk through that part and we go beyond that part. It's more just talking to me. And then we start to develop this conversation and back and forth. And we can even start talking about food like we just did on this podcast, but we end up talking about what they're talking about and what they need to get across. And we end it with just a feeling of, you want to do more. Let's do more. Keep telling your story. I'm constantly encouraging folks to tell your story, whether I'm the one helping you tell it or someone that just tell your story, get it out there, because it's important and it's just changing lives. It's saving lives. And that's what it's all about.
There you have it right there, folks. That's why we have the Sandboxx Productions, Sandboxx Design, Sandboxx Creations, because, we can help you tell your story through video or written medium. We've got the strategy. We have the diagnostics down if you're not sure where or what you need to work on. But we want you to have fun because, work is a big part of our lives. When people say, am I going to retire? I think, no, I'm making a difference. What am I going to do? So I just want you to enjoy what you're doing and know that you can have more impact. Sometimes you just need to get a story out there. And if you're not sure what the story is or how to get it, you have that sense of it. It's in your head, but it's stuck there because you have too much information and you need someone to help you deconstruct it. My go-to now is Ken. I just say, let me tell you, I've got this idea. And then I start, okay, I'm done talking. You go. Right. Because he can hear it and see it. And then we as a team can run with it. So it's always good to have a team in your pocket. And I know that's one of your favorite things to think about, is having a director or a team in your pocket. So Ken, wrap up this version or this episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast for us.
Well, what it is what you just said. It's having a creative studio in your pocket. And that it's that close. It can be that close. And this isn't to sell it. This is to say, this is the excitement part of for me, is I've been in this career for almost 30 years. And, I've worked through a lot of different organizations, big ones, small ones, startups, you name it. And I've told a lot of stories, a lot of commercials, a lot of features and magazine shows and stuff. What I'm really excited about is where it is now, and that we can create this creative studio in the pocket of those that need it, so that they can do the big productions, or at least approach that mindset to empower themselves to do those productions, to tell that story, to not be afraid. It's all about combating that overwhelming fear of can I, and it's more like you can. And I want to be the chef. And I want you to come to our kitchen in the Sandboxx. And Sarah and I and the team, we're going to be everything for you. We're going to be front of house, back of house. What do you need to make that perfect meal for the folks you need to serve? And that's the joy I'm having about this now. And I just want to share that.
Yeah, it's fun stuff and it's impactful stuff. So, folks, there you have it for this week on the No Labels, No Limits podcast. My request of you, if you found value in this, if you would please share it with someone else who you think would also benefit from hearing some of these ideas. Give us a rating and review. That's great. And then come back next week. We're going to talk about some other aspects. And as you know, we come back and forth with our inspirational guests who have overcome their own limiting labels and beliefs. So we're not done with them. We've got them lined up in the queue. They're waiting to get interviewed. So we hope until next week that you have a great week. Take time to listen to the stories being told around you for your organization and what you're trying to do, because they're there. You don't have to figure out how to go from hearing them to telling them. Just listen and maybe make some notes for yourself, because that's where it will start. Your creative mind will kick in and you'll think, oh yeah, that plus that. And don't forget, you can always go to our website, sarahboxx.com, find out what we're doing. And if any of it resonates with you, we'd love to talk to you. Okay, see you next week.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Boxx. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahboxx.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.